For the first time since December 13th, 2025, which was also the final event of the UFC 2025 calendar and of the ESPN era, the Ultimate Fighting Championship is hosting a Fight Night event, the first of its kind in 2026 and for the Paramount era. And where else would the first Fight Night event of the year be hosted other than the warehouse in the desert? The UFC Apex, UFC Vegas 113 is on deck. And look, I may or may not have posted a little meme video across all the channels kind of making fun at the Apex fight cards, especially when you're coming off of two back-to-back numbered events, UFC 324 and UFC 325 in this instance. But don't get it twisted, I'm sitting here every single Saturday watching every single fight from start to finish. I'm not making fun of the fighters, I'm not making fun of the fights. It's just starting to get a little repetitive and a little bit old, considering that we're in 2026 and still hosting Fight Night events inside the Apex rather than giving these fighters their due and putting them in front of sold-out crowds across the country and the globe. But the time for ranting is over, and now it's time to discuss this UFC Vegas 113 Fight Night card that is actually a very sneaky good card from top to bottom with a plethora of ranked matchups and storylines to discuss, and we will start with the main event of the evening, a pivotal number 9 versus number 11 ranked Bantamweight clash. Mario Bautista looking to bounce back from a loss, the first one that he had tasted in a very long time, against Lope Dog Vinicius Oliveira, looking to continue his rise to Bantamweight stardom. And not only is this a big time main event in the Bantamweight division for the start of 2026, but it is also the first main event opportunity for both combatants, Mario Bautista and Vinicius Oliveira, getting their faces on the poster for the first time in their respective careers. And as I briefly alluded to there in the intro, Mario Bautista entering UFC Vegas 113 off of a loss, the first one that he had had in quite some time. And for reference, it was the first loss that he had suffered in over 4.5 years, dating back to March 6th of 2021, in what was just his 4th UFC contest. Because after that loss to Trevin Jones, Mario would tally off 8 consecutive wins in a row from February 2022 to June of 2025, and that momentum and win streak would finally be halted in October at UFC 321 as he would get his biggest opportunity and test to date against the then former title challenger Umar Nurmagomedov, and they would go back and forth for 15 minutes with Umar pretty much controlling a majority of that fight, Mario having a couple of moments here and there, but ultimately Nurmagomedov will get his bounce back victory after his first ever professional loss that he suffered earlier on in 2025 at UFC 311 in a championship fight against Merab Dvalishvili. And during that 8-fight win streak for Mario, he had gotten victories over Damon Blackshear, Ricky Simone, Jose Aldo, and Patchy Mix in his UFC debut at UFC 316 last summer. So he was getting some big time wins against some big name opponents, and that was what would allow him to enter into the Bantamweight top 10, where he still sits today at number 9, looking to hold his spot in the top 10 against Vinicius Oliveira. Lope Dog Vinicius Oliveira will enter this fight on a 6-fight win streak, having not lost since July of 2022. And of those 6 fights in a row that he has won, 4 of them have been in the UFC, including his 5th one on the Dana White Contender Series in September of 2023, where he would secure a knockout in the first round to earn him a contract into the UFC. And he took the promotion by storm in 2024. His debut happened in March of that year, and he earned one of the most vicious knockouts of the entire year, a flying knee against Bernardo Sopai. And he has followed that up with 3 consecutive unanimous decision wins, all against great competition: Ricky Simone, Said Nurmagomedov, and most recently in July of last year at UFC 318, a victory over Kyler Phillips that would allow him to break into the top 15. The 9th ranked Bautista is 32, right in his prime. The 11th ranked Oliveira is 30, also right in his prime. This is a massive fight for the state of both of their careers, as they are looking to prove not only do they deserve to be in the top 10 of one of the most stacked divisions in all of mixed martial arts, but to be amongst the elite discussions and 1 or 2 wins away from title contention at 135 pounds. That is absolutely loaded. And when you break the fight down by the numbers, these two are both ultra similar. They're essentially the same size, both 5'9". Mario will have a slight 2-inch reach advantage for what it's worth, but even when you look into their striking stats, 5.58 strikes landed per minute for Mario, 5.28 for Oliveira. Both are relatively good in their striking defense, 55% to 57%, and both of them averaging around the same takedowns as well, 1.48 for Mario and 1.67 for Oliveira. These two are both extremely well-rounded mixed martial artists that have very high fight IQs, and that is why they have both been so successful in their careers to date. Because when combined, these two are 39-6 overall, but the biggest discrepancy across the board when you talk about all of the stats, all of the numbers, is the finishing prowess of Vinicius Oliveira, having finished 18 of his 23 victories, whereas Mario has just finished one fight more than half of his with 9 of his 16 wins by stoppage and 7 decisions. And while Mario has the upper hand when it comes to UFC experience, I would say that when you break it down in terms of the competition, they're pretty close in stature outside of the big Umar Nurmagomedov fight for Mario, but he would lose that opportunity. And I think another X factor in this fight that many people may not be considering is the fact that this is a 5-round, 25-minute bout. Neither of them have had to do so in the UFC, and even when you stretch back past the UFC for both of these fighters, neither of them have done it on the regional scene either. But what we do know for both of them over the course of a 15-minute fight is that neither of them have showed signs of getting tired or weakening as the fight progresses onward. Mario has gone the full 15 minutes in 5 consecutive bouts, having not been finished or gotten a finished victory since March of 2023. And as I already stated for Oliveira, yes, he has that high finishing prowess, but his last 3 bouts in the UFC have all gone the full 15. I think this is a fight where we can see a lot of questions be answered about the futures of both of these fighters. For Mario, we've seen him go on that massive win streak, but when he finally got to that big step up in competition, that is where he faltered most. Can he bounce back against someone nowhere near the caliber right now of Umar Nurmagomedov in Vinicius Oliveira? And for Oliveira, this is a proper next step up in competition for him, so can he prove that he belongs amongst the top 10 and amongst that elite discussion that I discussed a few minutes ago, and potentially by the end of 2026 be amongst the top 5 and in title contention? I'm curious to get your thoughts on this bantamweight clash down in the comments below. Give me your predictions and what you think is going to take place in that UFC Vegas 113 main event. In the co-main event, we have a super intriguing top 10 flyweight matchup between the number 6 ranked Amir Albazi and the 8th ranked UFC re-newcomer Kyoji Horiguchi. And I say re-newcomer for Kyoji Horiguchi because he had his first UFC bout since 2015 back in November when he made his re-debut against Tagir Ulanbekov, and not only did he get a victory, not only was he able to crack into the top 15 and all the way up into the top 10, but he was able to do that with a 3rd round submission win. And when you take a look back at the first stint in the UFC for Kyoji, he went 7-1, and the only loss that he had was in a championship fight against a top 5 fighter of all time, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, a championship bout that would take place in April of 2015. But even after that, he would win 3 more fights all the way up until November of 2016 before he would decide not to re-sign with the UFC, and then he would move his way over to Rizin and also have fights in Bellator where he would have a ton of success in both promotions. And now he is back in the UFC for the first time in 9 years, and he is still only 35, so he's not necessarily right in the middle of his prime, but he is at the end of those prime years, and he still has gas left in the tank to make another title shot run. And I wouldn't be surprised that if he gets a victory against Amir Albazi here, that he would get that crack and get that opportunity because he has the nation of Japan behind him, and he has a very big name across the global stage of mixed martial arts. And he hasn't lost a fight since April of 2022, and even in that loss, it was against Patchy Mix, who at that time was running through everyone in Bellator. So he is on a 7-fight unbeaten streak, 6 victories and 1 no contest back in the summer of 2023, and now he's looking to go 2-0 in his second stint in the UFC and maybe put himself right in the running for a title shot, and at worst, 1 win away. And for the Prince Amir Albazi, we did not see him fight at all in 2025, and we only saw him fight 1 time in 2024 and 2023. So when you're talking about names in this flyweight division and people that are in the mix, even though he sits at number 6, it doesn't feel like he's really in those discussions whatsoever. So if he wants to reinsert himself in a big way, he has to get a victory against Kyoji Horiguchi. Otherwise, he is going to be way, way down the totem pole at flyweight. And especially when you consider consider that the last time we saw him fight, November of 2024, it wasn't even a victory, it was a loss to Brandon Moreno in what was his biggest step up in competition, and he faltered in that moment over the course of a 25-minute unanimous decision. But for what it's worth, he was on a 5-fight win streak after debuting in July of 2020, and it's clear that he does have elite level skills in this division. 3 of his 5 wins are by way of stoppage, but I just worry that with the lack of activity over the last 3 years and the momentum of Kyoji Horiguchi, it is a recipe for success for the Japanese fighter. And I think it's even possible that with a victory here for Kyoji Horiguchi, assuming that Tatsuro Taira doesn't get a title shot against Joshua Van, which is potentially rumored to happen in March on the BMF fight card between Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira, then we could be set up for a massive Asian market style fight between 2 Japanese top 5 flyweights, but that could be a Monday morning discussion instead. But for now, give me your predictions for this flyweight clash down below. Next, we move to the heavyweight division in a very perplexing fight where Jailton Almeida will be putting up his number 6 ranking in the world against the unranked 0-1 UFC fighter Rizvan Kuniev, a fight that makes pretty much no sense at all. But then again, the heavyweight division is in absolute shambles after 2025, so what's new? Almeida will enter this fight after that absolute stinker of a bout that he had against Alexander Volkov in October at UFC 321, where he would lose a decision. But for what it's worth, before that, he did have back-to-back finish victories over Alexander Romanov and Sergey Spivak. He has shown wrinkles in his game where he has massive promise and even heavyweight championship hopes, but he's also had performances where he lays absolute duds, and you wonder how he's even in the top 10 at all. As for Rizvan, he did have one fight in the UFC, as I previously mentioned, and it was a loss against Curtis Blades, so I'm not really understanding what the UFC is seeing in Kuniev, because they launched him in his debut fight with Curtis Blades after having 2 victories on the Contender Series and was a former Eagle FC champion in Khabib's fight promotion. So they clearly see promise in him, because Curtis Blades sits at number 4 in the world, and even after losing that, he's now taking on the number 6 fighter in the world. The math is not mathing. And it's not like he has the craziest of finishing clips either. He has 12 wins, 8 of them by way of stoppage, which is good, but it's not like he has a 100% finish rate, knocking out every single heavyweight that they put in front of him. But he's 33 years old, right in his prime, and I think it is an interesting stylistic clash regardless, because he was able to pretty much halt all of the offensive wrestling of Curtis Blades, who is on paper the most accredited wrestler in the heavyweight division right now, and we know that that's what Jailton Almeida is going to look to do in his game plan of this fight. So if Rizvan can keep it standing, I'll be curious to see if he can wear damage down on Almeida and maybe even get a stoppage, something that he was unable to do against Curtis Razor Blades in his debut. And I will say that if Almeida comes out and wins this fight but in non-impressive fashion, or if he loses this bout, I don't think he will ever have hopes of challenging for a heavyweight title again, so he has to come out here and make an absolute statement, in my opinion. Very curious to get your thoughts on this matchup and what you make of the Rizvan Kuniev matchmaking throughout his first UFC bouts so far, and how you foresee this fight playing out on Saturday evening. And we have one other top 15 matchup on the card, and it's between the number 12 and number 13 ranked women's flyweights in the world, Wang Cong and Eduarda Moura. The Joker Wang Cong crashed onto the UFC scene in August of 2024 with a one-punch knockout in just 1 minute and 2 seconds, and has since racked up a 3-1 record overall, including 2 victories in 2025, but both of them were by way of decision, Bruna Brazil and Ariane Lipski da Silva. And we know that Wang Cong has hype behind her because she has a kickboxing victory over the champion Valentina Shevchenko in this division back in their kickboxing days. And I would really love for her to come out here and have another massive finish, because we can't forget that the lone loss that she had in the UFC was a massive upset, one of the biggest of 2024, where she would be submitted by Gabriela Fernandez after being hurt on the feet. But Eduarda Moura is no slouch. She is 12-1 overall and 3-1 in the UFC as well. So this is a fight where both of these ladies are looking to break into the top 10 should they come out victorious at UFC Vegas 113. And the lone loss for Moura was against Denise Gomes, and that was a very close split decision. But I will say that the last 2 wins for Eduarda are arguably more impressive than Wang Cong, as she would pick up a decision over Lauren Murphy in what was her retirement bout and against Veronica Hardy during her resurgence. And both fighters are right in their prime, with Wang Cong being 33 and Moura being 31, and I will say that she has finished 9 of her 12 victories, Moura that is, whereas Wang Cong has only finished 4 out of 8. It's going to be an interesting stylistic clash here, but I'm excited for this fight to be taking place as we need more high-level ranked matchups across all women's divisions, especially in this flyweight division, which in my opinion is the most deep and most stacked women's weight class in the UFC. As for the rest of the card, I want to mention a couple of fighters and fights that you should keep your eyes on, including Mikhail Oleksiejczuk versus Marc-Andre Barriault in the middleweight division. Someone is likely getting put to sleep via strikes in that one. The Basharat brothers are back fighting on the same card as Fareed in the Bantamweight division, who is still undefeated at 14-0, will be taking on Jean Matsumoto, where he's looking to make it 2 straight wins after suffering his first professional loss in February of last year to Rob Font. And being that Fareed Basharat is 5-0 in the UFC, I would say that the winner of this bout, regardless of who it is, will be getting a top 15 bantamweight next, if not even getting placed into the top 15 regardless. And for his brother Javid, who is 14-2, he will be taking on Said Nurmagomedov, who will be coming off of his loss to Bryce Mitchell in his bantamweight debut in the UFC last fall. And both of these guys are in desperate need of a win, as Said Nurmagomedov has lost 3 of his last 4 bouts, and Javid Basharat has lost 2 consecutive, including in February of last year where he would be brutally knocked out by Ricky Simone. So that is it for the UFC Vegas 113 breakdown, and now it's time for me to turn it over to you, and I want to get all of your thoughts, your predictions, and your bets for this fight card down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new, because every single week I break down the biggest and best fights and storylines heading into each card. I recap the most meaningful results in the aftermath, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can also join the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platform where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend, enjoy the fights, and I will see you all in the next video.